Next up before our discussion period is Mark Major, who's a senior advisor for SLoCaT. SLoCaT is the partnership on sustainable low-carbon transport, and their work supporting the UN Global Sustainable Development Policy process. And Mark has worked for many, many years, is that fair, in the transport sector, so we're looking forward to his remarks this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Julian Fernandez has given you the link on your work with the Paris Agreement and the climate process, and I'd like to take a couple of minutes to explain about a couple of other global policy processes which I think are relevant for your work and provide opportunities for your work as well. And to, if I go to the next slide, and to explain to you how we're taking these forward. I need to go back. Okay. So the Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport is a global partnership. We have over 90 members representing public institutions. All the development banks are our members, many research organizations, many national development agencies are our members. And we've been working on the integration of sustainable transport, all modes, in the global development processes. We're supported by a large number of organizations financially as well as our members. But the key thing here is we're taking all transport modes, all aspects. So Julian just spoke to you about the Paris Agreement on Climate Change of 2015 here on the bottom left. But we've been active in a number of processes in the last years. And I want to tell you particularly about the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the Habitat 3 agreement that was concluded last year, because I think these provide additional global policy context for your work. The 2030 Development Agenda was agreed in 2015. It replaced what you may remember as the Millennium Development Goals, and it's important to see this. This is the overarching UN Development Agenda. This was agreed by heads of states and governments, and includes 17 sustainable development goals, and of which, I can show you on this side, transport, in the center circle here, you have the 8 of the 17 which include transport. So transport is included directly in 5 of these, and indirectly in 7 more, so the outer circle. So we have, one of the development goals is on climate action. Another one is on responsible consumption and production. Another one on sustainable cities. Another one on energy. Another one on water. So transport is directly or indirectly involved in 17 of these. And it's important to see the UN Development Agenda as the overarching sustainable development process. So climate is part of it, energy is part of it, cities is part of it. Okay. Sustainable Development Goal 19 is about building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. So each goal has a number of sub-targets, and target 9.1, which is relevant for your work, is to develop quality, reliable, sustainable and resilient infrastructure. I won't read it all out, but it's important to know that after this agreement in 2015, there is a whole series of UN processes through the Statistical Commission monitoring progress, annual reviews of this process by ministers. So this progress on SDG 9 will be reviewed this summer by ministers in New York, and next year it will be reviewed by heads of state. So there's a whole series of formal processes which all the countries you're working in are engaged in and should be linking to. I think it's important for you to be aware of that 2015 agreement, the annual reviews at the ministerial level, and the periodic reviews at the heads of state level. And of course, you can look at the UN Sustainable Development website and follow the indicators, the tracking, and how that's all being done. I think this is... So now I switch to the second process I want to talk to you about. And this was that in October last year, we had the 3rd UN Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development. This is called Habitat 3. This is a massive UN conference on urbanization, which takes place only every 20 years. And of course, everyone is conscious when we are in Quito that we're on the verge of an explosion in urbanization. So, key figure to retain is we're expecting an additional 2.5 billion urban residents by 2050. So in just 23 years, we're going to have 2.5 billion additional residents. This is this expansion of cities, new people moving to cities, and this was very much, Quito was very much a chance for collectively to the world to reflect on how are we going to manage this process. The outcome document from this conference was the New Urban Agenda. So it's a 40-page vision for this urban development in the next years. And we worked very hard last year to make sure transport was properly included in this agenda. And we're quite happy with this. An important theme in the conference and the discussions was this link between cities and their hinterland, the supply chains that are supporting cities, and the impact that cities have on the broader area. So it includes passengers and freight. And I think, again, I was very happy that the keynote speaker addressed the links between ports and cities. And this is the big story. Many people say that the fight against climate change will be won or lost in cities. Cities already account for 80% of greenhouse gas emissions. So imagine in an increasingly urbanized world how important they're going to be. And I think the links between your work, supplying cities, ports in cities, is going to be crucial to this. So again, I think this is another document and another process which you should be aware of. SLoCaT has signed an agreement with UN Habitat to accelerate and monitor the delivery of the transport aspects of the New Urban Agenda, and that's one of the pieces of work we'll be taking for in the next years. Now, we're involved in a whole number of processes to support the implementation of these agreements. So in a way, the Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport is switching a little bit from being a lobby organization that it's been for the last 7 years, trying to lobby for the role of transport in these global processes. Now we're switching a little bit our role to be supporting and accelerating implementation. The first thing I want to tell you about is this roadmap, a global roadmap for the transformation of the transport sector. We saw that there was a lot of work going on in the individual modes, in individual technologies, in individual countries, in individual regions on decarbonisation. But we wanted to bring this together for a single, compelling vision for the transformation of transport sector. So we're now on the second version of this roadmap. We're working hard on consulting with rail, with all the other modes, with other regions, with other countries, to build a single, compelling vision for the transformation of the sector. It may be very important that the battery technologies have their own roadmap for transformation, or the rail sector has its own program. But we wanted to bring that together in a single, compelling vision, which we can get broad consensus on from companies, from governments. So again, this is a document which is open for consultation at the moment. We're integrating all these different modes and local work, and this is an ongoing effort. This is the second draft. It's by no means final. We're carrying on this year with regional workshops, modal consultations, and we hope that you will find this useful, and as it evolves, will support this single compelling vision. And I think it's only with a single vision that we all can agree on that we can really get traction and delivery from the public sector. So, as Julian Fernandez says, the Paris Agreement does not refer to individual sectors, so you don't find anything in there about maritime or rail, or even about transport specifically. So technically, transport has been very present in the negotiations. Over the many years, we've had conferences and workshops and technical experts supporting the process, but there's no political leadership for transport in the UNFCCC process. So we're creating this year a Transport Decarbonisation Alliance, which is a small group of leading countries, leading companies, leading regions that are trying to transform transport. And this is to give a shape and a political voice in this UNFCCC process to transport. So we think this is the way to really make some move ahead, to create critical mass, to politically raise the profile of transport. We were always there in the side events, in the side meetings, but we now need to be inside the actual negotiations driving. And we think this is the way to profile transport in that process, raise ambition. So far, and we've just started working on this now, we've had a very positive response from a number of countries. So I expect we will certainly have 7 or 8 countries which will spearhead this, that want to take the lead on transport. This will be introduced in the May session of the UNFCCC in Bonn, but we will be formally launching it in November at the end of the year. So again, if this is something that you see is useful for you, make contact with us. Another thing we did last year is that we wanted to bring increased attention to adaptation in the work on transport. The focus of transport was very much on mitigation, so we created this declaration on accelerated action on adaptation in transport. Within a few weeks, this was signed by nearly 400 individuals and 55 organizations, including a lot of the leading global funders that were very happy to have this extra focus on adaptation. We're going to be following up that and expanding that work in 27. We'll be having a workshop in the Resilient Cities Conference in May, for example. And we're also involved in the discussion of the World Bank-led Sustainable Mobility for All initiative. We've been convening the discussions on the Green Goal. Within the Green Goal, there will be a specific focus on adaptation. So again, an area of action we're trying to put focus on adaptation. The next thing I wanted to tell you about is that we have decided with a number of partners to prepare a global status report on sustainable transport. So other sectors have had some success by having global reports on their sector, like renewable energy, which have been instrumental in tracking progress and giving political attention to the gaps. So we've decided to do this. So it'll be a status report every 2 years, covering all modes, passengers and freight. And the idea that this is launched with a high-profile launch in 2018 to create attention around what's happening in transport, where the gaps are, the weaknesses. And we are doing this with a consortium of providers and data partners. One of the ideas is that maybe there's some people here which would like to be involved in this report, contributing a chapter or maybe some data, so that's something we could think about. And the first report will be in 2018 with a particular focus on transport and climate change. Of course, that will include mitigation and adaptation, and this will be qualitative as well as a quantitative report. So that will be the first report in 2018. Again, look out for that, but if you wanted to contribute to that, let us know. I come to my last slide and my concluding remarks. So I think we see from the Paris Agreement, from Habitat 3, from the UN 2030 Development Agenda, we really have, the agreements are now in place. There's a momentum on sustainable or transforming transport. So now it's about moving from getting the agreements to mobilizing the delivery. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it, and the monitoring of that. SLoCaT is working hard on doing this at a global and regional scale. Others take this to the national and local level. Our job is to be dealing with this, creating this globally and regionally. And I think that the costs and the effort involved in transforming transport are so great that you can't do it just to follow the climate agenda. I think if you can make links with these broader sustainable development agenda, with the urbanization agenda, then I think that gives you a much greater strength in your work and public support. So we see this single transformation needed. It's clear that infrastructure alone is not going to be enough to get us to the 1.5 degrees, so you may well be focusing on infrastructure. We will carry on a lot of our work trying to secure the other policy support we needed in transport, but in other areas, in health policy, in education policy, to get the behavior change and the fiscal policies that we need to deliver on the 1.5 degree scenario. And in all of our work, we should avoid this separation too much between infrastructure and operations. I mean, the service that is provided to industry is key, and if you separate this operations and infrastructure too much, for example, in the financing, how are we going to finance all this infrastructure? I think this is a weakness, so we focus on transport services. And we should do a much greater job, or much better job in transport, of exploiting these links between mitigation and adaptation. I think these things really, really go together. And it's great that in this conference here, you're discussing this integration and these topics together. That's very welcome, and often doesn't happen in transport climate conferences. So that's a great topic. So I will stop there. I hope this broader context helps you in your work in the next days. It would be a pleasure for me to talk with any of you if you're interested in any of these particular issues in more detail. Thank you for your attention.